Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Voices of Southern. My name is Madison Ditzler. I know you've not seen or heard me before, but today we have a special episode. It's going to be an AI debate between two MSSU faculty who are each passionate about AI in different ways. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. I'll go ahead and hand it over to you, Bill, to introduce yourself, your title at MSSU, research interests, your background, all that good stuff.
Awesome. So my name is Bill Fisher. I'm an associate professor of history here. I've been a faculty member here since 2015, so I'll be coming into my 12th year. My specialty is the history of Latin America, so I teach courses about Latin American history, but I also teach Western Civ, US history sometimes, historical methods courses and that sort of thing. My research is about the history of 20th century Ecuador, specifically the Amazonian region of Ecuador, but my teaching interests are kind of all over the map.
Awesome. Well, I'm Diana Fordham. I'm an instructional designer here and adjunct faculty. I actually have been in higher ed for about 30 years. I've been here for about 15. Currently, my full-time job is the instructional designer, but I do teach Western Civ. My history focus is Middle East history, and I have been doing that for a long time as well. I also am doing research with some EU professors on AI and how higher education is either going to have to adopt to AI and how that really plays a role in higher education today. So I'm grateful to be here and thankful that you thought of me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to hear about that research. We've got questions that will fit perfectly into that. So before we dive more specifically into higher ed, I'm wondering what each of your personal relationship is like with AI. Like how does it come into play in your daily life? If it does at all, what do you trust it with? What do you not? Diana, I'll give it back to you.
Okay, so I do use AI in a lot of what I do. I realized probably in January of 2023, Sam Altman released his ChatGPT on November 30th of 2022, and I realized I was either going to have to play the role of enforcer or architect. And so I decided early on that I was going to be the architect. And so what I did is starting to devise and using platforms that use AI to engage my teaching experience and the students' learning experience. And I've come up, I think, with some amazing exercises within my Western Civ class and the other courses that I teach to engage students in their learning.
Bill?
I don't use it very much. Not surprising, given that I'm taking the opposite position in this debate. I do use it in terms of Google Gemini searches. Certainly there's a variety of websites and other web tools that are AI powered that I will occasionally use, not things that I use as a core part of my work. I used to use AI for detection of AI, but I stopped doing that because I don't think it works very well for that purpose. And I kind of feel like that is a little bit of playing whack-a-mole. We'll probably kind of get into that metaphor a little bit later. But that's pretty much the extent of what I do.
Yeah, that's interesting, the whole using AI to check for AI and it can't figure out itself.
Right.
But I want to challenge both of you. Not that you're obviously you're both in academia. Neither of you are strangers to considering opposing stances and all the information and nuance and all of that. So Diana, I want to know what do you think is the strongest argument against AI use in higher ed?
There is very big dark sides to AI, and I teach that as well. I'm not sure that I can come up with something that would convince anyone that it shouldn't be used in higher ed. What I could convince you of, though, is that the ethic aspect of AI and the dark side of AI needs to be taught to our students. Because if we're using it as a Google search, we're expending energy, water, electricity, on, and you're not taking the responsibility. So if there is anything that is the dark side, and the dark side is a multitude of issues that we have to address. And so I feel that that's important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry, I should give more context
Sure.
than just waving at you.
Yeah.
I want to know your strongest argument, what you think is the strongest argument in favor of AI use in higher ed.
Well, frankly, this is perhaps going to run contrary to the idea that we're having a debate, but I think the best argument in favor is people like Diana, honestly, because Diana has a lot of teaching experience. She has an advanced degree in history herself and spends a lot of time thinking about both the pros and cons of AI. And so I think that there are definitely applications for AI in higher ed. I'll be honest, I'm not going to come onto this debate and take an extremely hardline stance, because I think that's kind of academically dishonest, because I certainly recognize that AI is already being used in various aspects of higher education. And I certainly can see that there's a lot of applications for AI in various fields for labor saving, for analysis of large data sets, for repetition of templates and rubrics and that kind of thing. So I think that there are a number of applications for AI, not just in higher ed, but in other fields, if I think they are well managed and well guided by somebody who's thought for a long time about it.
Now, Diana, I want to know a little more about the work that you do with students, like surrounding AI. Do you think that, like what kind of impact does AI have on student learning, positive and negative, for you?
So I teach a media literacy class. I do that through the honors program, and I do that in their honors forum. And so I teach, start with a 16-week course, teaching them how to be media savvy, and that does include AI. Usually when students come in, I get extremes. People that have tried it and really not used it, they've used it as Google searches, or people that are totally against it. And so my whole goal in that 16-week course is to teach them how to ethically use it, and then teach that as a research foundation for discovering resources. And that includes databases that are in our library. And I always have them not trust, but they can use it, but then they have to verify. And I think that is the biggest takeaway that I want my students, and which they do take away from the course, is that they question everything. They don't take anything for granted. And that is part of our, I think, roles as instructors, to teach them how to navigate this, because it's not going anywhere. So it's going to be something that we're going to have to face, and we are going to have to challenge students to become aware.
I love that idea, preparing your students, especially like informing them of, like the bad and the good of AI too, just making sure that they're really well prepared for whenever they do enter the workforce. And I'm jumping ahead a little bit in our questions here, but how do you think that universities have like a responsibility to our students to teach them how to use AI like that, and doing what you're doing?
Personally, yes, I do. Early on, I think it was probably January 2023, the consortium of the business leaders that met with the business department, I gave a presentation then. Of the 21 leaders that were there, 19 of them spoke that the role of MSSU is to teach our graduates how to use it ethically, because those are the people they're going to be hiring. And they're going to have knowledge in those industries. Of the 21 that were there, one of them said that they really didn't know much about AI, and one of them didn't have an opinion. But the other 19 said MSSU needs to prepare your graduates to be able to come into the workforce with the knowledge, because they didn't have it, because the 19 leaders that were there were not the advocates that were going to teach them. So,
Right. Now, Bill, what do you think about AI's impact on student learning?
So I think that there are a lot of potential benefits when it's guided by somebody as knowledgeable about it as Diana, but lots of very serious risks. And I think that some of the risks are best mitigated by moving away from using it as a tool in many circumstances. What I mean is the way that AI has a tendency to allow you to do more and faster. I think in a lot of fields, particularly history and particularly the humanities, more and faster is actually not necessarily better than slow and difficult. I think in order to evaluate the ethical use of AI and to evaluate whether what AI is producing is good, I think you need a really firm foundation in how to do the thing without AI assistance. I think it's it's like the understanding of, you know, when we teach kids math, the whole purpose of continuing to teach them multiplication and division is so that they understand what the numbers are doing before they use a calculator, right? I think there's a lot of analogies you could draw to that. We want people to be able to show their work. Oftentimes, you know, when you're given a more difficult math problem to solve as a kid, when you're learning mathematics, one of the things that the teachers will say is, show your work. And I think that unless you can teach people how to show their work when they're using, you know, when they're doing something in the field of humanities or arts or political science, or even a lot of business applications, the risk is that if they can use AI tools for lots of output, they might be doing it without actually understanding the output they're giving and why it is or isn't good or effective for meeting the task that's been assigned to them.
And now, okay, for context, you both taught pre and post AI. And I'm wondering, are there any changes in students that either of you have noticed since the introduction of AI and it's became so like widely accessible?
I have noticed a decline in reading comprehension. Now, this is a secular trend that probably predated the development of AI. Literacy rates, the ability to read at an appropriate level, is in decline in pretty much every country in the world except a couple of Scandinavian countries probably. They're always the ones that are, that are bucking the trend of everywhere else.
At the top, yeah.
But I think that what I've noticed, my suspicion is that students, when they encounter a difficult text, for example, rely upon AI summaries of the text rather than wading through the friction of understanding it in a slower, more difficult way. And I think that the slow, difficult is actually what gives students it gives their brains the exercise that they need in order to be able to think critically and understand something at a deeper level. So, you know, since the advent of AI, particularly in the last 3 years or so, I've started to redesign the way I do assignments in class, which is probably something that we'll get into a little bit later.
Yeah.
Yes, I have to agree 1,000,000% with that. I do feel that, and I can only speak for myself, but at one point when I realized that our method, our paradigm of assessment, I needed to change my paradigm on how I assess students. And so I structured writing assignments, reading assignments, research assignments based on a paradigm that has been different than anything I've ever done. I still use the writing portion of it, but I really assess on their process and making a reading assignment or any type of assignment more of a process driven, with the outcome being a writing assignment that I will assess maybe for 30% of their grade instead of for 100% of their grade. So the process, which is several steps, is 70%. And I have found that successful, although I do feel reading comprehension has been weakened by AI, without a doubt.
It's such a, like, was it you that had said there's like a trend, literacy rates declining, and then like AI being introduced into everything? I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I think about the future of academia too, and like what academia and what that all will look like. I can't imagine being a professor whenever AI became so widely accessible and having to completely redesign your coursework to try to figure out how to maybe not beat this thing, but to work around it where you can, or you know, use it to the students' benefit and to your benefit.
Right.
And I'm wondering, you know, because there are so many students who they're going to use AI, it's out there, but like, at what point does AI assistance in your coursework, in your homework, as you're completing an assignment, what point for each of you does that become academic dishonesty? You want to start?
Sure. We have a academic integrity policy here at the campus. We will never create a policy that will say you can't use AI, because that will be unrealistic and it's unenforceable. So what we've done is we have 3 statements that go into our syllabi, and we determine which of those 3, my class falls under open use. The second one would be minimal use, where I tell you you can, and the third one is absolutely no use of AI. So it's going to be where the professor is comfortable with, and what how they're going to structure their what they accept as plagiarizing, which I think my bottom line is plagiarizing is plagiarizing.
Right.
We know that all of the formatting guideline, APA, MLA, Chicago, they all now teach students how to cite AI. And so if you're going to use AI in my class, number one, you have to let me know with the statement at the bottom, but you also have to cite it correctly. And so plagiarizing becomes plagiarizing, or still stays plagiarizing. And I've worked that into that paradigm, that what it's always been. So, you know.
I mostly agree with Diana. I'm not turning into a huge fight this debate, but no,
Debate was a loose
well,
term anyways, just to...
So I think it really depends. I think that it's appropriate for there to be a different standard across different disciplines, and I think it's appropriate for there to be a different standard even within the same, one professor's set of courses. If you're in a marketing course, for example, and your assignment is to create marketing materials for a theoretical company, I think I can understand using an AI application in that regard, especially because that is precisely one of the applications where AI is currently being used in the workforce. On the other hand, if you're doing the majority of what my kinds of assignments are, which is analyzing a text or analyzing a primary source, a historical document, then in that case, I think I'm going to have a much higher or lower, a much lower bar for what's acceptable, or a higher bar. Well, anyway, a much more prohibitive bar for what's acceptable, because if I give students a fragment of, let's say, Homer's The Odyssey, or something from a Roman jurisprudence from the 1st century, I really want their analysis and interpretation of that text to come purely from themselves without any tools. And so I try to design assignments and exams that will make it nearly impossible for them to use those kinds of tools to help them with that.
Yeah, I know a lot of professors have pivoted to we're doing written assignments in class, put your computers away, get the paper out, you turn it in at the end of the hour, that's it. And again, I can't imagine what it's like to just have your
I've been doing written exams since before AI, and now I feel more vindicated in my
more vindicated than ever.
Sticking to the written exams. It used to be, when I first started working here 10 years ago, I would tell my students that for the exam you need a blue book, and everybody knew what that was. There'd be no problem. They'd go to the store, get a blue book. Nowadays, when I say for the exam you need a blue book, everyone's like, what?
What is that?
And but what I've read articles suggesting that across different universities, doing blue book style exams. And for those who may be listening and not know, it's just an exam booklet. It's just a booklet of lined notebook paper that students physically write their exams in. A lot of professors are going back to using that kind of exam.
Why? And see, with that too, I've always seen education as a very deeply human thing, teaching another person something that they're going to use later on in their life to impact others. Do you think that AI use in higher education, does it risk making the field less human, or making education less human?
Well, I'll take the yes position, because that's sort of my role here. But I don't think it's a blanket yes across the board. But I've seen a lot of students online and other places say, look, if the professor's using a lot of AI assistance for things like grading, why should I not use it for whatever I'm producing? And I see that. I think that one of the benefits of Missouri Southern in particular is our really small class sizes, and the fact that every student who comes here has a real opportunity, a real chance to develop a genuine relationship with their professors, and a lot of one-on-one time, or nearly one-on-one time. And so for me, I want to try to remove any kind of technological barrier as much as possible between me and the students. And so I will do things in what is likely a more labor-intensive way for me, if it means coming up with a fresh rubric every time, or meeting a student in person to copy edit their paper between the two of us, rather than having something like I can't remember the name of Microsoft's or Google's tools for that, but there are Microsoft and Google AI assisting editing tools, and I'm always encouraging students to come to me for that sort of assistance, because I also think that kind of sticks, if you're making some kind of error in your writing repeatedly, having your professor actually explain it to you in a one-on-one way is more likely to stick than sort of allowing the AI assist to fix it for you and kind of move on. That removes friction, but I don't, like I said before, I don't think removing friction is always the goal. I think sometimes friction is very instructive to somebody, and it helps lessons stick and implant more deeply.
I'm going to take the depends side,
Okay.
more on the yes side, so maybe this little debate.
Yeah.
I have structured things to where I agree, I want to be accessible to my students, but sometimes when I've used AI assignments, and the one that I'm thinking about is that they had to produce a script, and then they had to go and produce it, the video on AI. It was their takeaway, it was their epic finale. And, you know, oh, this is easy. We just love Mrs. Fordham, you know. When they were doing it 10 and 15 times, because they did not realize how labor intensive some of these things were, people were showing up in my office, what do I do? What do I do? You know, that type of thing. And I was able to say, figure it out, because at the end, you're going to present this in class. And it was amazing, because it was something that I had not done before, and it was something that engaged the students with each other and with me. So I'll go the depends route. You know, yeah, I think it depends on what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish, and what the assignment objectives are. And so I think you can make it very, not labor intensive, but student interaction intensive with the instructor.
See, in students, we polled them on Instagram. We posted a poll, and this was like, I was curious, you know, I really wondered, like, where do MSSU students stand on this? What questions do they have? And so we posted a poll on the Moso Lions Instagram account, and would you be surprised to learn that anti won with the younger generation and everything?
I wasn't surprised.
No, I wasn't surprised either. I think one of the most, if you look, you know those Google Analytics for the usage of a word over time, the word slop will have spiked dramatically beginning in the year 2025. I think, I also think that there's a difference between the college students that are people that are in currently the 18 to 22 years of age range, which is where a lot of our students fall, versus people more in the like 25 to 30 range. I feel that I sort of, I don't want to say anti-technology, but I feel that there is a pro-authenticity vibe bubbling up among teenagers right now. And I think that there's a lot of negativity around what they regard as AI-produced content in their social media feeds. I think one thing that is certainly true for most teenagers is they probably have an Instagram or a TikTok or whatever reel, and those things are becoming absolutely full of AI-produced content. And most people regard it as negative. It's the spam email of the 21st century. Well, I guess that was the 21st century too, but it's the new version of spam email, which people are just sort of against. And I think one risk for using AI in higher education is if you do it in a way that students perceive as having been low effort or quickly generated or not thought through, they're going to associate that with the slop that they see on their social media feed, and that potentially could devalue their perception of higher ed. And again, be very clear, this is, I think, a theoretical. This is not in any way something I'm accusing Diana of at all. But it is, I think, a possibility for allowing AI tools to enter higher ed at too large a scale or with too little consideration.
And you know what? You're right about like not being surprised with that. I was surprised, but yeah, it makes total sense. There's such a return to like analog media too. Like vinyl records are so back. Things like CDs and all of that. There's definitely like this yearning among my generation for like simpler technology, simpler tools. So yeah, that makes sense. And like I said, we also asked students to submit some anonymous questions for you. Some of them were in bad faith, so we've not included those, and some of them didn't fit the scope of the episode, but we can get into them if we've got some time. Now, the first question that we received: when it comes to AI and academic integrity, how do you know if we use AI in our work?
That's a great question. Do you want to go first?
I'd love to go first.
Yeah.
Because I set my prompts, my essay prompts, whatever it is, for originality on my part, that they can't use AI. So if, let's say, somebody does AI, I do not, and nor can we use a detector, because there's no such thing as detecting AI, because there's too many of them. And so my rubrics are very, very concise, that it has to be in your own words. And I can pick an AI-driven essay by a student because they'll always answer questions I did not ask. And so there are things, and I set that up. There used to be honeypot technology where I could put a word and hide it in a prompt, and then if they used AI, it would show up on my end. AI is starting to detect that, but I still do that in a sense because I'm asking for their own voice. So I'm not saying, I never accuse a student of using AI. What I will say to my students, you did not use your own voice. And when they come back and try to fight that, I've only had one ever try to fight that. And when I asked, why did you answer this question, because I didn't answer it, most of them do not return my emails, or they don't come to my office because they know that.
They know you know something.
And it's a zero. I mean, I don't kick them out of the class. I teach them that, hey, next time you better try harder. But it's a zero for the assignment or a zero for the essay, whatever I'm doing.
Right.
So there are things that I do that don't take a detector, but it takes time and practice, and yeah.
I have very little to add. I think that's exactly right. I think I used to use detectors, but I quickly, over the last year or so, I've come to realize that they are not reliable. They don't work. And my intuition, I think, is almost always right. I think that there's a very characteristic AI voice to the writing. It almost kind of sounds like a pod person. I mean, I imagine, you know, an alien species trying to essentially resemble a human being, because it's writing that is usually technically perfect, but voiceless, without characteristic, without personality. And I try to tell my students is like, look, I would rather see you take a big swing and a miss in an essay than turn in something that is technically perfect but very safe. It's just kind of, AI-generated writing is often very beige, and I want color. And so one thing I haven't done yet, but one thing I'm considering adding to some written assignments in my classes is if I require you to write an essay, there's going to be a second component, which is when you come and talk to me about your essay, right? I essentially have an oral exam about what you've written to make sure that you've understood what you've written. I haven't done that yet, but I'm thinking about how to implement that as a way of saving the essay. You know, I used to assign a lot more sort of 3 to 5 page essays among my intro classes, and I've cut way back on that precisely because of the AI problem. But I think one way to salvage that or bring that back a little bit would be to add a kind of oral component to the essay.
Yeah.
I do have an anecdote that I think is important to share. Because I do use AI, I know how most of the major AI platforms work. So early on with GTP, ChatGPT, I realized that it used the word indelible all the time. And so my first essay that came in that I detected on my own, in a 5-page paper, he used the word indelible 5 times. So I thought, okay, so this was an online class, and so I said, we need to meet on our virtual platform, and he was fine. We had created a relationship in other assignments, and when he came in, I said, explain to me how you wrote the paper. And he, big eyes, you know, deer in the headlight type eyes, and he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I just want to know how you wrote it. And he was speechless, and I said, well, can you define the word indelible?
You got him.
And he was like, my mom wrote it. And probably used AI, you know, and it's like, now I'm watching you, and you're not, and he goes, I need an A in this class. Well, there was no way, but he told me at the end that that made the difference and just haphazardly thinking that he can use AI. And because we are watching, we are very purposefully trying to create things that you can't do that. That's cheating, that's plagiarizing. So.
Yeah. And ultimately, it's their own learning, too, that they're shorting themselves on. Yeah.
But he can now use the word indelible correctly.
Well, good for him.
Silver lining.
That's not even a word that I feel like I hear people say often, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, definitely a giveaway. I will say AI can pry my M dashes from my cold hands.
Yeah.
I love them.
Yeah.
The M dashes and the threes, like just something about the pattern of speech, the flow. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've got some personal beef with AI just for the M dash thing. But okay, another student question, which this is one of those ones that's like it's still a little bit charged, but I think that it's again interesting that our students are thinking about this. Okay, are you concerned that growing reliance on AI could eventually replace some aspects of what professors do?
Yes, I am. I think that unfortunately that a lot of universities are looking to cut costs. And I think the real danger is that good enough will replace the human touch that a professor can actually offer. I think that there are aspects of content delivery, especially in online courses, that could be fully automated, and I think it would be to the detriment of student learning. But I fear that some of these tools, particularly what they're calling the agentic AI, which is AI tools that can essentially not just generate a single text, but rather work within a system and produce various outputs by sort of, if I understand it correctly, pulling different levers of a system. There's already agentic AI that can take an online course posing as a student. And so if there's a Blackboard or Canvas shell, and it's not just turn in the paper, it's turn in the paper and post on the discussion board and do this assignment that's watching a video, there are AI bots that can do all of those things posing as a student. And I worry that a university that is very concerned about cost cutting and maximizing profits, universities are nonprofits, most of them anyway, but I worry that this idea that quick and simple can replace what a human being brings to the classroom will win out in certain cases, and I just hope that's not the case.
I tell you that's not the case here, at least while I'm involved in digital learning and the group that we have in digital learning. But I do see that. I can see that it might be where it's headed. We definitely create and train on how to make sure that your students are not doing AI and discussion board type things, and we watch that. But yeah, I do worry. I worry that we're expected to do so much more with so much less, and this might be an easy way. So I think that we have to be careful.
Yeah. On the other hand, I mean, looking at the adoption of AI in industry and in various fields, there's been a flurry of articles over the last few weeks about companies saying, the money we've been spending on AI actually doesn't seem to be paying off for us in quite the way we thought. Uber, for example, the Uber CEO said that they blew through their AI budget in just 3 months. So their 12-month budget for AI, they blew through it in 3 months without really seeing any increased output, without really seeing any benefit to the company's bottom line. And so I think some of the bets that industry has placed on AI productivity gains there's some cracks starting to show in whether those things are actually going to pay off. And I think a similar thing would likely happen in higher ed, but my fear would be people would only realize that actually this isn't beneficial until things had gotten too far along and people had already lost their jobs and cuts had already been made and so forth.
There's so much of that I didn't know. That's insane. 3 months.
Yeah.
Their entire, wow.
Yeah, because the cost to businesses for using AI tools at an enterprise level is going up and up and up, so that the AI companies they need to turn a profit, which is something that they haven't done yet. And so as those costs continue to rise, companies are going to have to stop and be like, well, wait a minute, are the productivity gains we're seeing from AI actually justifying the fact that our budget for using Claude or using ChatGPT is going up by this much?
And unfortunately with that, they're not taking anything back. You might spend your 3-month budget. That doesn't mean AI is going to pull back. That doesn't mean AI is going to go away. That just means that particular company is going to have to reevaluate their budget because there's no ROI on that.
Yeah.
And so that's what's scary, because I don't care what we do or what we say, it's not going anywhere. This is a worldwide, we are in competition with China. And and they have no standards, they have no regulations, right? And so we've got to compete. So no matter what happens, AI is here to stay, and it's going to be interesting, and it's very, very scary to me.
Yeah,
because
I agree AI is here to stay. What I'm not certain about is whether it is going to pay off for all of the investors. What I mean is, it's sort of, there have been other parallels in history. You know, for example, in the 19th century, the railroad boom, right? When railroads were constructed in the United States, there was this flurry of activity basically from the end of the Civil War up until around the year 1900. And at a certain point, the industry realized, like, we're building way too many railroads. We actually don't need 5 different lines going from St. Louis to Chicago. And so all of a sudden they started canceling these planned railroad projects, and there were economic crashes because of that. But that didn't mean railroads disappeared, right? There are still railroads. They were still very vital. I think we're going to see a similar thing with AI. I think we're going to see, if you will, maybe like a right sizing of, we're going to learn what the actual appetite, what the actual market for these AI tools is, because I do think it's a little inflated right now. But I'm not an economist.
Yeah, and I will take the opposite side on this one, because there's been disruptive technology in higher education since the 1950s. I remember in the 1970s when calculators came, and you know, oh my gosh, this is going to change everything. When the internet came. There's been many, many computers, but computers still exist. They don't exist in the way that I first started using computers in the 1970s. They've gotten better, but there's not as many companies. But it still was a disruptive technology. It was a technology that's changed education. And I think we're on that path. Just to accept that we're going to have to change paradigms, not to catch, not to be enforcers, but to be architects, like I said at the beginning, because I think there's examples in history as well that were successful and have made that change.
This part of this conversation about like the longevity of AI being in question made me think of, I saw online, this was a couple of weeks ago, and I don't know how like factual it was, but I just wanted to kind of know your thoughts on this, or if you know any more. But like AI cannibalizing itself, kind of, because it's consuming its own like misinformation, the hallucinations and whatnot. There's so much of the AI writing out there now that it's pulling from its own, and it's just kind of spiraling. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so AI has a tendency to hallucinate. Whether or not that's getting better, some people say it is, some people say it's not, but it definitely does happen from time to time. But if AI hallucinates something, but then that then becomes text that is out there on the internet, a person might repost it, a person might quote it, then future AI models are going to be trained on that data. So something that was originally hallucinated is then being sucked up by another AI as like something that it's being trained on.
Real source
and
material.
so at a certain point, misinformation just becomes part of the soup that it's drawing from.
And I do want to explain a little aspect. AI does have an end goal. We are still in narrow AI. That started in 1950. We'll see that go all the way through with Siri. We'll see what happens in 2007 with the iPhone. AI has been here. That's called weak or narrow AI. We are in generative AI right now. It's still weak. What the end goal is jumping the Rubicon, not just crossing the Rubicon, but actually jumping to general, where it starts to perform as a human would. That's what my research with the 2 professors in the Czech Republic is on, is because I'm of the mind that if generative AI, which we are in, that weak AI, has a clock, we are at 5 minutes to the hour. But we are nowhere near general. And so the end goal is to get to general. The tech bros that are out there, the Sam Altmans, the Eric Thiel, Elon Musk, they want the money and they want the power that general AI is going, and I think we are, it won't happen in my lifetime, I don't think. And so when it cannibalizes itself now, it's working its way to an end goal, and that end goal is the next step.
And I do think the implications of that are very troubling. I mean,
Yes.
I think I'm not sure if it's Sam Altman, but one of the other leaders of these AI companies, they said, well, eventually we won't have to worry so much about the big challenges we face, like climate change and so forth, because eventually we'll be able to just ask AI what to do about climate change, and it'll tell us.
Elon Musk said that.
Yeah. So okay. So that right there is just about the most macro version of, I think, some of the risks of using AI thoughtlessly. The idea that you can use AI to skip all of the hard steps to the easy solution. I mean, I think at a very micro level, I think that's what we both want our students to avoid doing. We don't want them to use AI as a way to jump to the final product without having gone through the struggle that the steps teach you along the way.
Whenever you started with, you weren't sure if it was Sam Altman or someone, but one of the big tech CEO people said something. I thought you were going to mention. Sam Altman is the ChatGPT. Okay. I believe it was him at least. He was at I don't know. He was speaking, and he said something to the effect of, "Well, we see a future where intelligence is a utility, and you can like purchase it from us just like you do your electric bill and all this other stuff."
Right.
Whenever I see that and I think about like academia, that's really alarming to me. That's one of I don't know. I mean, and you've both studied history too, so you know a thing or two about like whenever certain groups are like just gatekeeping knowledge and everything. Like,
yeah.
Well, Sam Altman is also the one who let the horse out of the gate in 2023. He and Elon Musk were partners. They just had a lawsuit. He also presented to Congress in May of 2024 and said, if AI can go wrong, it will go very wrong.
Yeah.
And so they know.
Right.
They know exactly what they're doing.
And I also think at a certain level, pronouncements like that, like AI is going to, intelligence is going to be a utility that you pay us a monthly bill to have. I also think that they also recognize that the nearly, the $1 trillion a year is being invested into AI, and the profits are just not there yet. And so they know that things need to become much more profitable than they are now. They need the widest adoption possible, or a lot of these financial bets that have been placed are not going to pay off. So I take some of what people like Sam Altman and Peter Thiel and others say a little bit cynically, in the sense that they also have a lot of money, and their investors have a lot of money riding on this sense that a sense of inevitability, that it's going to be something that we're all using 24/7.
yeah.
And one more thing on that with the money. Remember, the current administration gave $500 billion to the 4 tech bros that were on that stage. Elon Musk was off to the side. The very next day, China came out and said, well, look at what we just developed for $36 million. And that was, of course, their DeepSeek. And so there is a competition between those two countries specifically to make them more money. So some of these investors, some of these smaller companies that aren't making the money, doesn't mean the bigwigs aren't, because the investors are the ones that are trying to get Greenland for the minerals, so we can make the chips, and compete with China. And so there is something bigger going on than anything that we know and anything that we experience, and that's scary. That's worrisome.
Absolutely. It kind of becomes this arms race. I think of like the Cold War and stuff too.
Exactly.
Well, okay, sorry.
Okay.
Tangent.
It's a big topic.
We're always speechless, right?
Yeah.
Daily.
Which actually, you know what? I wanted to pivot back into student questions. This is a student question that falls outside of the scope of higher ed, but it's about like cybersecurity and like what are our risks like as a nation if we don't keep up with the technology if we don't keep putting the money into it, and other countries are ahead of us and they're using it in military operations and everything? Is that a danger to us? Of course, they don't know that we have history faculty here, but still, I think that that's something that you guys could probably speak to.
Well, I can tell you that anything we can do, China thinks they can do better. So when we talk about electric grids, when we talk about AI interjecting militarily into some of the things that we have in this country, we do it. The United States does it. It's a threat. We're a threat to the Chinese. The Chinese are a threat to us, Russia. And so when you say it's a Cold War, it's an arms race, that's exactly what I look at when we talk about that. It's not nuclear weapons per se. And when you talk about the war that we're in with Iran and who supports Iran, again, these are the big players in AI.
Absolutely.
And that's, I don't know what to do about that. I mean, I know the history.
Yeah. I don't really have anything to add or disagree with there. One thing I would say, though, is we, I think, have both been a little bit guilty in this conversation of AI is actually a variety of different technologies. There's a lot of different kinds of AI. As Diana said, some of the AI technologies that we're using today are evolutions of things that have been around for a long time. Some of the applications of AI, for example, in the healthcare-related fields like cancer detection and pattern recognition, that's actually a very different technology than the large language models that, for example, ChatGPT works off of. And so I think we also need to make sure that as we talk about the future of AI, some distinctions need to be drawn between the different types of AI, because what might be used to power drones in a military capacity could be a very, very different technology from what we're talking about, in terms of essays in college classrooms and stuff. So, and I think it's actually I think it serves the big AI companies for us to pile that all into the same box and treat it all as the same thing. And I think it's important to distinguish between the different technologies we're talking about so that we can see the different sort of players at work.
Yeah, I agree with that. I hadn't thought about specifically, we definitely should have started off the episode with some sort of disclaimer on that AI contains so much more than what we think of whenever we think of higher ed and whatnot. But so pivoting back to the essay writing kind of AI models, several students had expressed concerns about what happens if too many people become overly reliant on AI. They don't want any of the mental friction there. What does higher education look like if we all become dependent on these tools?
There's a analogy that I use in my class sometimes. I very often have athletes in class. Let's say there's a football player. If you're on the football team at Missouri Southern, I guarantee that the strength and conditioning coach has given you a certain set of bench pressing benchmarks they want you to hit, right? They want you to do a certain number of reps at a certain weight. Because that's the point. The point is to do that exercise and get stronger. If that football player was to go to the coach and say, I actually got a forklift that can raise the barbell up and down for me the number of times that you said, so I got this tool to do it for me, that football coach is not going to be convinced. The purpose of the strength and conditioning is that it's you're doing it, that there's no shortcuts. There's no shortcuts to getting stronger. And I think higher education is the gym rather than the workplace. What I mean is, in the workplace, it may make all the sense in the world to increase your output at a faster rate. If that's what the boss demands, if that's what the work environment demands, is more output, then lots of tools can be used to bring about more output. But I don't think higher ed is the workplace. I think higher ed is the gym. And so doing things the slow, hard way is kind of the point of education, at least I think as much as possible. And so I guess I sort of view my role as a professor in this age of AI is to make students understand that it's no, you got to lift the weights yourself as much as possible. And after having done that, you'll have the tools, you'll have the ability to exercise judgment over what is good work and what is bad work. You'll have developed your own voice and your own point of view. You'll have developed things like tact and culture, which is what the workplace really demands, right? Because I think more and more CEOs and bosses are realizing that the skills that humanities teach, like the personality skills and the tact and the judgment, are things that you've got to develop in the gym, the metaphorical gym as I've laid it out.
Yeah.
Here at Missouri Southern, as indicative by the poll that you took, 264 were against it, 104, which I think probably were my students, I don't know, that said that they thought probably useful. I don't know, I'm just kidding. But at this point, I am not as worried about this today or next semester as I might be in 4 or 5 years in higher ed.
Right.
And in the meantime, as we develop and as what we see what's going to happen, again being the architects and again being the people in charge that make sure that we're doing it the right way. But we can't do it the right way if we don't know what's out there. So as Bill is very well aware that he knows what's out there. He knows what students could be doing, how they're using it. And right now, I think we've got a good handle on it. I take polls, or I get feedback every semester. I've been doing it since January of 2023 to know where my students are. Now we've had a whole 4 years go through, so these students have moved out. We'll see what happens when we start next fall, but I haven't seen a real shift of people just, oh, so gung-ho, and this is, at least in my class, is going to make a difference for me to get a good grade, because my grade distribution has remained about the same.
Yeah.
And I've been tracking that. So that's very interesting. Where my grade distribution goes up is when I use a technique in my class where the students meet with me once a week on my online class, where we get that one-on-one that Bill was talking about. We get to discuss this. Yeah. And so I still think that that's very pivotal and very central to what we do here at Missouri Southern.
Totally. Another question that our students had, knowing how tricky academic integrity and everything has become, how does education move forward? And with that, should the focus be on like just detecting AI, which we've already talked about, that's really difficult, or is it those assignments, the in-person, the just bringing back that very human aspect of education?
I think the latter thing. I think Diana and I are probably in full agreement on, we're taking opposite positions on this debate here, but I think we're in full agreement that what professors need to focus on going around AI or using it in ways that they're very intentional about, rather than sort of detection, right? Policing. None of us went into higher ed because we wanted to be a policing, Right. So I think adaptation is very important, and there's always going to be curmudgeons, but I really am not very familiar with anyone out there who is sort of sticking their head in the sand about this. I think everybody I've talked to in higher ed is really more on the adapt side of things rather than the police side of things. I think that the differences perhaps come in the selective use and how much of that you want to do.
Right.
Yeah, and I do speak to higher education institutions in the 4-state area. I just did one down at NWAC, and it was interesting because I am not finding as much as I did at the beginning of people that stick their head in the sands and hair on fire. Oh my gosh, students are going to cheat, and then I have to whisper they've been cheating forever.
Yeah.
It's a different mode. What I am finding now is how do I create these engaging learning environments that allow students to use AI for their benefit. And I think one of my favorite things that I've done, I create a chat bot, and they interviewed Martin Luther at the end of a escape room, 5-room escape room, and I created the chat bot based on educational material, and they have to interview them, 10 or 15 interactions, and they have to write the paper, but they have to also do lateral research. And the feedback that I'm getting from students that they would never have gotten out of that assignment what they should have gotten out by reading a book about Martin Luther, but it's because then they got to ask leading questions. And there was one specific question I was asking them to discover on what they could find out just interacting, and then going to do the research to see if he was right in the chatbot. And students didn't know they were using AI. I do have to tell them, and we should always verify, you are talking to a machine. Martin Luther is not alive. You know, and that seems silly, but I do make that declaration. But not one of them came back and said, this AI was awesome, because I don't know that that's what they knew they were doing.
Yeah.
If they would have thought about it, and I'm sure they didn't voice it to me, but yeah, the interaction is what made it stand out. And so I get that feedback, you know, because I ask for the feedback, and I want them to be critical, and they can be. So
You trained your own chatbot.
yeah, I created my own
Wow.
chatbot.
How do you go about doing that?
I use a tool within Blackboard, and then I go and get all the research material I want, and then I put that in the bot, and then it asks questions. I did one on Muhammad one year, and they wanted to know why he wanted his wives to be veiled. Well, it didn't answer the question correctly, so I went and got the educational material, put that in, and had them try it again. And it still didn't answer the way they thought it should be answered when their research, but it did answer it better. So
Yeah.
it's a tweaking all the time.
So you're kind of teaching them in that process too how to fact check AI. So
Lateral research, yep.
yeah, the reasonable doubt with
Yep.
that. Yeah, that's great.
Always question.
Now I want to know what you think of that like assignment approach with the interviewing the chatbot. That's so unique.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a really interesting assignment. What I would probably do instead is have students role play as Martin Luther, right, in that particular case, in which case they would have to sort of try to train themselves up on how Martin Luther would respond. And so I would think I would more likely to have them take on the persona of a historical figure rather than talk to one. That's a chatbot.
Yeah.
It's an interesting assignment.
Okay, now this question's going to close out our student Q&A, which did have more responses about environmental impact, questions about data centers being put in rural communities, and the cybersecurity that we've already talked about. And now if a student like this were to exist, which I hope that they don't, because if you're using AI to do all of your coursework and write all of your emails and everything, why are you getting a college education? You know, you're not getting your education, you're giving it away.
Right.
So what would the both of you say to a student, again, if they exist, to a student that uses AI for everything, for all their coursework?
I think what I'd say is as soon as you get into the workforce, it's going to become very apparent to people higher up than you that you don't really understand the job duties you've been assigned. I think that it's important to know the thing from the ground up. If it's the kind of workplace where there are certain AI tools that you can use to boost productivity, that's one thing. But I think that it's unavoidable that in a conversation with a colleague or a boss or some other kind of coworker or a client, it'll become very clear that you don't understand what it is you are selling or doing within the workplace. And that is going to expose you as somebody who is not really ready to be a productive member of that team. And so I think that reliance on those tools, over-reliance on those tools is going to kind of get you you're going to get in, what's the word, expression? You're going to get in over your head real fast.
I don't think that student exists today, at least on our campus, because if we're creating the engaging learning environments that hopefully we all are, they wouldn't be able to withstand the pressure from within the course because they wouldn't be able to participate and carry their weight, if you will. And so I really don't think that we have a student like that on this campus. And I think it would be almost impossible, unless you were taking the same instructor for all of your classes, it would be virtually impossible to have AI do all of your work. And I think we're going to be the gatekeepers on that. The individual faculty members and class teachers, we have to be the gatekeeper on that.
Yeah. I also, you've kind of changed my mind. I kind of thought that maybe a few students like that existed just because whenever there's an easier option, you know?
I think there are students that will, I think that most students understand at some level that they can't shortcut their way through everything. There was, I mean, what school was it where I think it was someplace on the West Coast. at graduation, a student brought his laptop to graduation, and right after he processed across the stage and got his degree, he opened up his computer and showed his camera his like ChatGPT log, showing that he had used it for every single one of his assignments, and he was doing this in a triumphal kind of way. They revoked his degree.
Are you serious?
So,
oh
you know,
my gosh.
yeah. So I don't think we have. I've never met a student at Missouri Southern that is that egotistical. So I think we're safe in that regard.
I probably have met a student that would try it, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't think they'd be successful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that is probably a bigger institution, I would think, and probably sometimes students know more than I do, and we might get one of those. I haven't met that student yet, is what I should say. So yeah.
Oh my God, I did not know about that. That's hysterical. Okay, well, sad, but also
Pretty sad,
like
yeah.
consequences.
Yep.
Okay, see, I was struggling whenever I was writing these questions with like, I need to end on a positive, like lighthearted note, you know, because this is a heavy topic. There's so much to it and everything. So before I get into like my more lighthearted, fun questions, I want to make sure I give you, Diana, like plenty of time to talk about that like amazing research that you're doing, with AI, the projects.
It just started. We met together when the professors were here. Blanca and Dominic and I have already met together. We come from totally different approaches to AI. I'm probably in the middle. Dominic is much more into the AI on the technical part, and Blanca is totally against AI. So it's going to be interesting because we're going to develop a method where we can teach the same, or at least use the same tools with AI to see how it develops in the United States and the Czech Republic. It is a EU grant. They're looking at it better, but hoping to publish that and really work this next semester on seeing what we can do. And so I'm real excited about that. Yeah. And it's Dominic, because I was concerned when they were here. I said, where are you? Where are we on this jumping of the Rubicon to general AI? And he kind of laughed at me, as other AI people or technical people have laughed at me, like, you don't know anything. It's correct. I really don't. However, he said, he's the one that used the clock analogy, that we're about 5 minutes to the hour as far as maxing out this weak AI. And then he said, in his lifetime, and he's young, in his lifetime, he won't see it. So that's encouraging in some respects, but it also is discouraging because I don't think it's going anywhere. And so these tools are going to be out there, much like the calculator is still out there, but we'll see, we'll see. But again, the gatekeepers. And so, yeah, I'm excited to start, and we've already started developing that. So.
Are these professors from Hradec Králové?
Yeah, it was.
So it's a plug for one of MSSU's partner institutions in the Czech Republic. Yeah.
They were just here.
Yeah, students, faculty and students from MSSU can go over to that university in the Czech Republic. I haven't done it yet, but I would like to someday.
Yeah, that's amazing. There's all sorts of cool stuff that our faculty are doing, and that
this is an amazing institution, by the way. It really is.
It is. Subtle plug.
Yeah.
Who's watching?
Okay, so my more fun questions. What's, like, this is going to be like kind of rapid fire, just the first thing that comes to mind. What is the one thing about AI that people get wrong, in your opinion? Like the most annoying AI myth that you hear?
That it's all-knowing, and that it's going to be the end-all to everything. That is so false. So, yeah, that's the biggest myth.
I think for me, it's something I said before, which is that people collapse what are actually a variety of different technologies into AI, when in fact there's a real big difference between certain things that are being done in the medical field versus what's being done with, like, ChatGPT, for example.
Yeah. Okay, this is my last question, and it's the silliest of them. If AI was one of your coworkers, what would its personality flaw be?
I think it would be overly affirming and obsequious. I think one of the problems that people sometimes run into with chatbots is they're too agreeable, and that sometimes has some pretty negative outcomes. But yeah, I think a real life person AI would probably be overly complimentary.
I also think an AI personality would lie a lot, so I wouldn't like them. And they would answer every question confidently, like they knew what they were talking about.
Yeah.
You know, and we're so afraid with personalities like that to challenge.
Right.
We're afraid to break AI. And I try to teach my students to break AI. Don't take their answer.
Right.
No, you're right, Bill. They come back every time I say, you know, if I'm on ChatGPT and I'm saying something, you're wrong. This study was done, and they'll come back, oh, Diana, that is so true. You know, and it irritates the hound out of me. But it's the confidence by which they gave me the information, like they were right, and you need to accept everything I say.
Yeah.
So break it, yeah.
That reminds me of the, sorry, little silly detour again. But on social media, I've seen these memes where, well, it's not really even a meme. They're using AI and they're asking it, hey, can you count to 10? And it goes 1, 2, 3, and so on. Like that's it. That's all it does. You can ask it over and over again.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, so can you finish it? And they're like, yeah, sure. 3, 4, 5.
And so on.
And that's it. Or like they'll ask how many R's are in strawberry. And it's like, there's 1 R in strawberry. No, there's not. But it swears that there's 1 R in strawberry or 2 R's, whatever it thinks, and cannot count to 10 or 100 or whatever.
Yeah.
So.
There are ways, at the beginning, you asked me how I use it, and I say, well, nowadays, the first thing you see on Google is the Gemini result to everything.
Yes.
Sometimes it's useful, but sometimes I just got to scroll past it because it's like, no, I don't want your summary. I actually want a website to click on. And you sometimes have to, and then you have to go past the sponsored results until you get to the thing that you're actually looking for.
Just constantly having to dig for that, like gate-kept information, essentially. With the AI like overview summary thing, and again, this is one of those things where like you see it on the internet, it could very well be fake. But for a little bit, whenever AI was first introduced in the Google search thing, it would be like, how many, you could ask it, how many rocks should a person eat every day? And it'd say, the average person, you know, to like stay healthy should take 6 to 8 rocks, small rocks every day, eat them. I'm serious, like I saw this. Again, could be like
Must have thought it was
Photoshop
giving
or
advice to
whatever.
a chicken.
Yeah.
Because I think chickens actually are supposed to eat little rocks. It has something to do with their digestion.
Yeah.
Wow.
It got confused. But yeah, AI can hallucinate and affirm things.
And we do say hallucinate. I like to use the word lie because it is, that's it. And it's not that it's purposely, it's just how it's trained.
Right.
When we jump that Rubicon to general, that's going to go away, and that's when we need to be afraid, very afraid.
Now I'm going to ask another question. With general, is there like I know you said that there's these different stages to it. Why is that one called general? Because
Because that's strong. It's strong AI. So we're in weak. This will be jumping over to strong, and they will be able to reason. It will be able to reason. Like right now, I can play chess with AI and come up with a strategy, and AI beats me all the time. But I can't apply that strategy to anything else. When we go to general, they'll be able to take that strategy and apply it to several different domains, and that's when we're going to have AI thinking like a human. But we are, I'm telling you, we are tons of years away from that.
A way to illustrate that, for example, is you think of, for example, Einstein's theory of relativity, E equals mc squared. He came up with that theory, I want to say like 1905. If you could somehow take ChatGPT or large language models back to 1905 and train it on all of the human knowledge that existed in the world up to that point, ChatGPT would never, ever, ever, ever come up with E equals mc squared. It cannot create new knowledge. All it can do is rearrange and repeat back.
Right.
So general AI, which is theorized by some, is like, that would be the level at which it would be able to come up with a new insight, the way that it actually took a human brain, Albert Einstein's brain, to actually do.
Right, yeah. Wow. Well,
There's some steps that we need to do before we get there, and AI companies will laugh at me and say, you don't know anything about how this works. And they don't, they've explained it to me, and so I think that we're a long way off from general.
yeah. Well, thank you both so much
Thank
for
you.
your
This was
time
fun.
today. It was. I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you did too.